The force that waits silently until provoked is said to be the deadliest, not the one that brags about its might. The Steel Legion motorcycle gang believed they were battling a helpless elderly woman when they bounded into the farmer's market in Oak Hollow. They were completely mistaken. This quiet Saturday morning was going to become a brutal lesson in power and consequences because Eleanor Walker had been hiding a secret for 15 years. These bikers had just committed the worst mistake of their lives by threatening her mother. Her son, Commander Logan Walker, was not just any soldier fighting abroad, he was one of the most deadly Navy SEALs to ever finish the training. Some claim that a person's company can be used to gauge their strength. True power, according to some, is in knowing when to wield it. A group of haughty motorcyclists are going to have to learn both lessons the hard way today when they find out that they began a war with a family that understands exactly how to put an end to one, rather than merely picking a quarrel with a farmer's widow. Let's have a little rest. Please let us know where you are tuning in. Remember to subscribe if you enjoy this type of content, since tomorrow's story will be something very exceptional. Maggie Walker set up the food display at her market stand, the fresh veggies still clinging to the morning dew. Long shadows were cast over the marketplace by the early summer sun as local traders prepared their stalls for what was sure to be another busy Saturday. Maggie, who was 68 years old, moved with a lack of expertise, her silver hair pulled back in a useful braid, her sharp eyes scrutinizing every aspect of the performance. "This week's tomatoes are especially delicious," she said, addressing Mrs. Henderson, who had been their first Saturday customer for as long as anyone could remember. Grinning, the old woman picked up one of the deep red fruits and examined it with a critical eye. Mrs. Henderson added a few tomatoes to her basket and said, "Your husband always did have a way with tomatoes. What's up with Logan? He hasn't been in the news recently." Maggie answered after carefully rearranging a basket of fresh herbs. "He has returned to his base and stated that he may shortly be granted leave." She didn't bring up the odd tension in his most recent phone conversation or how he had requested her to prepare their emergency procedures just in case. The morning went according to its normal schedule, with a constant flow of regular customers mingling with summer visitors who had fallen in love with Oak Hollow. Maggie took solace in the routine, which included weighing produce, making change, and giving customers recipe advice. Since she was a little girl, the market had served as a makeshift home for her as she helped her father pick vegetables with hopes of one day owning her own farm. In the middle of the morning, she was visited by Marshall Morrison, the sheriff of Oak Hollow. His carefree manner was unable to conceal the worry in his eyes. "Maggie, quiet morning?" "Marshall, as always." "Even so, you don't typically visit farmers' markets." Picking up an apple, the sheriff turned it in his hands. "There have been several instances of motorcyclists using the county roads. I wanted to make sure that everything was all right here." Maggie's hand momentarily stopped on the display she was setting up. "The Legion of Steel? Perhaps. Lately, they have started venturing into uncharted terrain. Simply. Please keep your eyes open." Maggie noticed that she was paying closer attention to the market entrance after Marshall left. After losing her husband, she raised Logan by herself and taught him all she knew about sticking up for what's right. Those lessons may be even more crucial now. She was joined at the stand by Henry Peterson from the next farm, who assisted her in replenishing the corn display. He said softly, "I saw some bikes on Route 27. A mean-looking group. Not your typical weekend bikers." Maggie responded, "They're just passing through," but her hand inadvertently brushed the cell phone Logan had given her, the one that was set up with a unique emergency contact protocol, in her pocket. As the morning progressed and the sun rose higher, a faint anxiety began to seep into the air of the market. Vendors looked at each other anxiously. Children and parents remained close. When the Steel Legion made the decision to enlarge their area, everyone recalled what had transpired in Millbrook. Presumably for more tomatoes, Helen Henderson went back to Maggie's stall. "Perhaps we should pack up early today," she said quietly. "People saw those bikers. In 3 counties, they had reportedly been causing havoc. Helen, this is how I make a living. Every time there's a rumor of trouble, I can't run. Maggie's voice was solid, full of the same calm fortitude that had enabled her to manage a farm and raise a boy by herself. Just before midday, the first distant rumbling of motorcycles could be heard. Like incoming steel, the sound rolled across the fields, getting louder by the second. Maggie saw the quiet market morning evolve into something darker as worried faces looked toward the commotion and conversations paused in the middle of sentences. Sheriff Morrison reappeared with his holstered firearm in his hand. Maybe you should, Maggie. Marshal, I'm staying. She proceeded to arrange her produce, each motion smooth and purposeful. This is my community, my market, and my home. As the rumble became louder, they could now hear separate engines and the rapid approach of several motorcycles. Maggie reflected on Logan and the numerous occasions he had attempted to teach her self-defense techniques while he was at home. More significantly, though, she considered the lessons he had actually imparted to her. Standing your ground when it counts most is what defines true strength, not having a lot of physical strength. At the market entrance, the first bikes emerged, their chrome glittering in the midday light. There was a decision to be made, stand up or stand down as the Steel Legion arrived in Oak Hollow. Maggie Walker knew her peaceful Saturday morning was going to change completely as she watched them draw closer. The motorcyclists were unaware that they were posing a threat to more than simply a farmer's widow. They were going to discover why some people, like some storms, are at their most deadly when they seem completely at ease. The ambience of the market changed instantly with the appearance of the Steel Legion. A purposeful line of 12 motorcycles crossed the gate, their engines roaring like predators. As he dismounted, their commander, Chuck the Hammer Loganson, looked formidable, 6'4" of muscle and leather, his eyes and beard graying from too many violent nights. Chuck said, "Well, well," his voice echoing over the now quiet marketplace. "This is the cutest little setup, isn't it?" His gaze wandered across the booths, admiring the handcrafted items, fresh fruit, and the anxious expressions of the sellers. "Particularly charming." Maggie proceeded to carefully and methodically arrange her tomatoes. She had already encountered bullies who confused fear for respect. Chuck's group dispersed through the marketplace behind him with well-honed efficiency. He stopped by Maggie's stand and said, "Name's Chuck. Most people refer to me as the Hammer." Carelessly, he picked up a tomato and tossed it from hand to hand. These days, how does a little, pleasant enterprise like this pay for protection? Even though her voice was faint, Maggie's response was clear: "We don't need protection. Oak Hollow looks after itself." Chuck's eyes did not meet his smile. Millbrook also mentioned that. They now always make their payments on time. Watching the tomato splatter against the sidewalk, he let it fall. "I'm sorry." Sheriff Morrison showed up close by, in a relaxed yet prepared position. "Friend, you might want to pay for that." "Or what?" Chuck slowly turned to study Morrison's uniform. "Will you stop us? Which army are you and?" Maggie whispered, "I can manage this, Marshal." She looked straight into Chuck's eyes. "The tomato will cost $2. There was a piercing laugh from one of the motorcyclists, a younger man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck. "You don't appear to know how this works, lady. You pay, we don't. For defense, for comfort, for safeguarding your charming small market from mishaps." With a shaky but determined voice, Helen Henderson took a step forward. "Never before have we required protection." "Times change," Chuck said, continuing to focus on Maggie. "The world is becoming more hazardous. These small towns need friends, strong friends." Maggie thought about Logan's instructions as her palm touched her phone. He had told her one morning, "That's all you give them. You call me after that," but she wasn't yet prepared for that. This was her market, her home, and her duty. She stated clearly that Oak Hollow is not Millbrook. "We wish to avoid any problems." "Problem?" Chuck's tone was mockingly worried. "We are merely entrepreneurs seeking to offer a service. Boys, isn't that correct?" His crew had set up shop in strategic locations throughout the market. A few were looking at stands with a disproportionate amount of curiosity. Others were merely observing, their presence a blatant danger. 20%, Chuck added. "Our standard rate is that. A small cost for assurance of safety." Sheriff Morrison took a step forward. "That sounds very similar to extortion." "It sounds like business," Chuck retorted. "Or would you like to create something else?" The silhouette of something weighty was visible on his leather vest, where his hand lay lazily. There was utter silence in the market. Vendors looked on in hardly disguised terror. Children were hugged close by their parents. Money wasn't the only factor here. Control and destroying a sense of community were the goals. Chuck's voice was surprisingly friendly as he said, "I'll give you time to think about it. Don't take too long to discuss it with your pals here." He gave Maggie a direct glance. "I would hate to see all of this lovely stuff go to waste." Maggie saw something that others would have missed when the gang leader turned away. These were not your typical goons. Their movements, their awareness, and their location. She thought of Logan's friends in the military. These were trained men. "Maggie, are you all right?" Chuck had gone to another stand when Marshall requested in a low voice. She said in a quiet voice, "They're not just here for protection money. Take a look at their methods. This has to do with control and territory." Marshall gave a small nod. "Take note of that as well. They are too well organized to be intimidated. What is their true objective, I wonder?" Maggie observed the Steel Legion members as they proceeded with their leisurely exploration of the marketplace. Every exchange was planned, every danger nuanced but obvious. They were mapping the community and determining its advantages and disadvantages. Helen joined them and stated, "They'll be back, just like in Millbrook. They begin by taking over businesses and bringing in their own staff after using the money for protection." "Not in Oak Hollow," Maggie said firmly, "not here." She considered Logan's ability and the emergency phone in her pocket. However, summoning him would escalate the situation and introduce a new form of violence to Oak Hollow. There must have been another route. As Chuck completed his rounds, his voice reverberated throughout the market. "Folks, consider our offer carefully. We'll return this afternoon to get your response." His gaze returned to Maggie. "Some offers are only available once." Maggie made her choice while the Steel Legion mounted their bikes and the morning air was filled with the steel of motors. Not quite yet, she refused to call Logan. She would first attempt to deal with this in her own manner, using the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of farming, the loss of her husband, and the upbringing of a kid by herself. She couldn't help but believe that this was only the beginning, though, as she watched the bikers ride out. Oak Hollow had not been a random choice for the Steel Legion. Regardless of the motive for their presence, it was far more than mere extortion. The atmosphere had altered, yet the market gradually came back to life. Yes, there was terror now, but there was more. Willpower. Oak Hollow was no stranger to difficulties. Together, they would tackle this one as well. The Steel Legion failed to realize that, like individuals, certain societies might become stronger under duress. Maggie Walker had dedicated her life to imparting that particular lesson to her son. It took a lot of effort to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining, it means a lot to us. Let's return to the narrative. The farmers' market in Oak Hollow was alive with anxious activity following the Steel Legion's departure. Small groups of vendors congregated, their voices low and anxious. Sheriff Morrison had positioned himself close to the market entrance, serving as a reminder that trouble would inevitably reappear as well as a source of comfort. Maggie started to pick up the tomato that had been spilled, moving slowly and precisely. With her fingers still agile despite having arthritis, Helen Henderson knelt down to assist her. Are you considering giving him a call? Quietly, Helen inquired. She was among the few people who were fully aware of Logan's military background. Maggie straightened up and said, "Not yet. Logan has already fought enough wars abroad. This is our house and our issue." Henry Peterson, his aged visage solemn, joined them. "Maggie, these aren't like the miscreants we had last summer. There is a reputation for the Steel Legion. How did they treat Millbrook?" Sheriff Morrison walked up to their group and said, "I remember Millbrook. Protection money started off exactly like this. They then invaded businesses and brought in their own staff. They took over half the town in 6 months." Maggie observed individuals attempting to resume their regular activities as she surveyed the market grounds. "Marshal, what are you not telling us? Territory isn't the only issue here, is it?" After looking around, the sheriff lowered his voice. "State police informed me. Though not at random, Steel Legion has been growing. Towns with strategic importance are the ones they are aiming after." "For what purpose is it strategic?" Helen inquired. "Where?" "Infrastructure. Oak Hollow is situated where 3 counties converge. We have the grain storage facilities and the railroad depot." Maggie decided it was ideal for moving items that shouldn't be moved. She had not squandered the years she had spent listening to Logan's meticulous explanations of tactical thinking. A young mother, attempting to shop normally in spite of the atmosphere, came up to Maggie's stand. Though her mind was processing the ramifications of Marshall's words, Maggie served her with trained efficiency. After the customer departed, Henry stated that they would return at 12. "How will we proceed?" Maggie said, "We're going to get ready," with the same understated authority she had used when managing the farm by herself. "First, then, we must be clear about what we are working with." She reached for her normal cell phone, not the emergency one. She dialed a number from memory, and after 2 rings, a voice she recognized answered. "It's Maggie, Helen. Do you recall our discussion regarding Millbrook? I require all of your knowledge regarding what transpired there. Everything you were told by your brother." The main doctor in Oak Hollow, Dr. Helen Roberts, had a brother who served on the city council of Millbrook. Over the course of the following 10 minutes, she disclosed information that was unsettling. Maggie hung up and told the others it was more than intimidation. They selected particular companies, the petrol station beside the highway, storage facilities, and locations that would facilitate their movement and concealment of items. "Substances?" Helen recommended. Marshall confirmed that it was among other things. "However, they require cover from legal firms. They are here for that reason. Oak Hollow is ideal. Big enough to blend in with the background, yet small enough to manage." Attracted by the conversation, other sellers had gathered around Maggie's stall. The fear of the morning was gradually changing into something else. Willpower. In '62, my father confronted cattle rustlers. Old Tom Jenkins raised his voice. Said that if you give in once, you'll give in forever. "Tom," Henry cautioned, "this isn't cattle rustlers. These guys are well organized. Risky." "So are we," said Maggie softly. She surveyed the assembled faces. Farmers, artisans, and small company proprietors. Together, they have endured economic troubles, droughts, and storms. Those who fled trouble did not build Oak Hollow. Logan was on her mind. About the strategy teachings he had imparted when he was at home. She went on, "They expect us to be divided. I'm afraid. Controlling is simple. We must present them with an alternative." "What exactly do you propose?" Marshall questioned, although it was clear from his face that he already knew. "We'll be ready and together when they return." Now Maggie's voice was clear. "We demonstrate to them that Millbrook is not Oak Hollow. We are not helpless victims in need of rescue. As a community, we stand united." The market changed over the course of the following hour. In order to eliminate blind areas and create good sight lines, vendors moved their stalls around. Those who owned trucks placed them in strategic locations so they could be quickly evacuated if necessary. Everybody had a position, a role, and a goal. To make sure state police would be close by, Marshall made a few calls. Though not close enough to incite the Steel Legion, they were prepared to react if the situation got out of hand. Dr. Helen Roberts had her clinic ready for anything. Maggie could feel the weight of the emergency phone in her pocket as noon drew near. She had received it from Logan with explicit instructions. "All it takes is one call, Mom. I don't care what I'm doing or where I am. I'll be there." But she knew that phoning Logan would be a last resort as she saw her town get ready to stand as one. The Steel Legion believed they were up against a little town that was at risk. They were going to discover that inner power isn't necessarily derived from external sources. On the horizon, the faraway rumble of motorcycles reappeared. Maggie positioned herself behind her stand, head up and back straight. The future of Oak Hollow would be determined by what transpired next. She finally decided what to do with the phone in her pocket as the sound got closer. She refused to call for assistance. Not quite yet. They would first demonstrate to the Steel Legion the type of community they had chosen to threaten. The Steel Legion came back with twice as much might. With their motors blaring louder than anything else, 20 motorcycles steeled into Oak Hollow's Market Square. In an effort to deflate tensions before a serious altercation broke out, Chuck the Hammer Logan's son led them in a purposeful circle around the market's perimeter. Maggie refused to back down, observing the riders' positioning. Not haphazard intimidation, but strategic positioning. At least some of these men were trained in the military. As she had witnessed it innumerable times while observing Logan's team during their training visits, she could see it in their movement patterns. As he dismounted, Chuck remarked, "Quite the welcome party," pointing to the townspeople's and vendors' united front. "You people must have been really busy while we were away." Sheriff Morrison moved ahead as the midday sun caught his badge. "The market will close RLY today. You might prefer to shop somewhere else." Chuck's laugh was not funny. "Buying? No, we have a business here." "In relation to which?" He looked at Maggie's pedestal. "Mrs. Walker, you had time to consider our offer." She corrected calmly, "Eleanor. Indeed, we have given it some thought." "No," is the response. There was silence in the bazaar. Chuck's face tightened as he took a closer look at Maggie. "I asked around while we were away, you know. It's interesting how people in tiny towns converse. Son serving in the military, widow managing a farm by herself. Managing things alone must be difficult." Maggie said, "I managed just fine," pointing out that Chuck's guys were gradually enclosing themselves. "That's not how this works, you see." Chuck stepped forward, his bulk obscuring her stand. "Saying no is not an option. The whole premise is that no one gets to say no." "There's always an option," Maggie said resolutely. Marshall interrupted, "Like the choice you gave Millbrook. Before you began smuggling drugs through their businesses. Prior to the disappearance of people." "No," Chuck's head jerked in the direction of the sheriff, his eyes blazing dangerously. "Lawman, be careful. Such accusations could be harmful to a man's health." Maggie muttered, "If they're true, they're not accusations. We are aware of your true desires. The location, companies, and rail link of Oak Hollow. Ideal for your actual business." Chuck's well-practiced intimidation momentarily faltered, exposing a more icy side. "You don't know what you're dealing with, lady, or what you're talking about." Maggie actually looked him in the eye steadily. "I believe we do. You're an ex-military person. Some of your men, anyway. The manner in which you move and arrange yourself. Isn't this more than a gang? This is not the same thing." Chuck reached for his vest, but the tension was broken by Marshall's voice. "I wouldn't do that. Everybody here is recording this on their phones, and state police are 3 minutes away. Are you certain you want that level of attention? As he looked around the throng, the Steel Legion leader noticed the phones aimed toward him. His face changed to a more calculating one. All right, let's try this again. He signaled to his soldiers, who started to move with well-honed coordination. Produce was strewn all over the floor as displays were abruptly being overturned. Nobody was able to stop it since it happened so quickly and effectively. This was deliberate devastation rather than haphazard vandalism. The thing about tiny places is this. Chaos exploded all around them, but Chuck remained composed. They rely on narrow margins for survival. A tiny firm can be destroyed by one bad day. A farmer can be destroyed in just 1 week. How much longer can you all wait? Maggie saw the methodical destruction of months' worth of labor. The Steel Legion targeted infrastructure rather than humans, moving with military accuracy. They were conveying a message, not causing harm. This is your final opportunity, Chuck said. We won't only target property the next time. As Henry Peterson attempted to defend his position, a brawl broke out. With expert efficiency, one of the bikers, the one with the snake tattoo, threw him to the ground. Like a gunshot, the sound of Henry's arm snapping broke through the confusion. Maggie's words echoed over the devastation, "Stop. That's sufficient." When Chuck raised his hand, his guys instantly stopped what they were doing. He was able to maintain complete military-level discipline over them. "Mrs. Walker, it's up to you. We can do business our way, or you can do business with us." Maggie finally saw the full extent of their predicament as Dr. Helen Roberts hurried to treat Henry's arm. This was much more than just territory and protection money. Motorcycle gang intimidation served as a front for the Steel Legion, a well-organized organization. Chuck told the stunned throng, "You have until tomorrow morning. Either all of the businesses here accept our terms, or we become quite antagonistic." Maggie's hand went to her pocket as the Steel Legion got on their bikes. In order to safeguard her neighborhood and prevent the problem from getting worse, she had wished to tackle this locally. However, she realized they had passed that stage when she saw Henry being placed into Helen's car and the methodical devastation of her neighbors' livelihoods. In her hand, the emergency phone felt heavy. Chuck stopped next to her stand just before he rode off. "Advice? Try not to call for assistance. In towns that don't cooperate, phone lines tend to go down. Towers of cells as well." He grinned icily. "We take great care." Fear and devastation followed the bikers' roaring departure. However, they had committed a crucial error. Maggie was holding a phone that wasn't your typical cell phone. Someone who knew exactly how to keep in touch when regular channels were disrupted put up the satellite connection. Maggie Walker entered the emergency code Logan had taught her while the people of Oak Hollow started to clean up the damage. A communication that would change everything was about to reach a Navy SEAL commander in a military outpost thousands of miles away. Oak Hollow compromised Steel Legion MOM in trouble. The days of managing things in silence were ended. At Naval Station Norfolk, Commander Logan Walker was wrapping up a mission briefing when the emergency signal was received. His pulse skipped a beat when he heard his private phone's distinctive vibrating pattern. His mother had served for 15 years and had never used their emergency procedure. He abruptly excused himself, interrupting other cops in the middle of their chat. He checked the message in the hallway. It was 8 words that made all the difference. "Oak Hollow compromised Steel Legion MOM in trouble, sir." He was followed out by his second-in-command, Lieutenant Ryan Torres. "Is everything all right?" Already, Logan's thoughts were turning to operational mode, examining resources and risks. "Transport to Minnesota is required. Quick. Details about the Steel Legion, a motorcycle gang." "The Legion of Steel?" Torres's face grew serious. "They're more than simply motorcyclists, sir. Some are ex-military. Been generating problems in 3 different states. Bring me everything you can. In 10, the full briefing. With his satellite phone already out, Logan made his way to his office. The first call. Marshall Morrison, Sheriff. It's Logan Walker, Marshall. The sheriff's voice was clear but tense as he spoke. Talk to me. Logan, they really struck the market. Professional and well organized. This gang isn't just any gang. They are trained and well organized. Just one of Henry Peterson's injuries is a broken arm. Mom. She's all right. Held her ground. However, Logan. Tomorrow, they will return. Putting out requests. Putting everyone in danger. They have previously done this. In different cities. Logan had already turned on his computer. Police reports are displayed on several displays. Maps of territories. Patterns of incidents. I can see it. Millbrook. Preston Valley. Rapids, Cedar. They systematically occupy towns. That's not the worst part, Marshall added. Gang violence is being used as a front for something more serious. Mother of yours worked it out. They are focusing on particular infrastructure, storage facilities, railroad connections, and companies that may be utilized for distribution. Not only drugs, then. Don't believe it. This is overly structured and polished. Small communities are being used as nodes in a broader network as they construct something. Satellite photos of Oak Hollow and the surrounding area were spewed out by Logan's humming printer. Marshall, I'm going home. Is it possible to postpone them until morning? We'll try, but watch out, Logan. These men have high-level contacts. When local police attempt to investigate them, they are reassigned or worse. Torres came in and placed a big file on Logan's desk. Intel Steel Legion, sir. Additionally, I have a C-130 prepared at Langley. Can have you ready in under an hour. After hanging up with Marshall, Logan opened the file. His assumptions were validated by the first page. It was more than simply a gang, Steel Legion. It was a front. Under the pretense of being motorcyclists, former Special Forces operations and private military contractors were involved. Torres, their leader, gestured toward a picture. Look who Charles Chuck Logan's son, a former Army Ranger, has been meeting with despite his dishonorable discharge. The following image, taken outside a private airport, featured Chuck with men wearing pricey suits. Business relationships. Better. Torres produced an additional document. Private security companies and defense contractors. Not all towns are being overrun by the Steel Legion. They are constructing the necessary infrastructure for a larger project. Logan recognized the plan by studying the pattern maps and applying his tactical knowledge. They are establishing a shadow network by exploiting tiny communities as a front to transport valuables that require expert protection and military accuracy. Once more, his encrypted phone buzzed. His mother's message. In preparation for cutting communications tomorrow, they are keeping an eye on the roadways. Torres paused, sir. Going informally might generate issues if they have the ties I believe they do. Many high-ranking officials do not want their country's private military contractors to come under scrutiny. The file was closed by Logan. He made up his mind. Then, we don't formally enter. He took out a tiny box from his desk drawer. There was a simple silver ring within. Before his first deployment, his mother had given him his father's wedding band. Bring me Lieutenant Rodriguez and Chief Parker. Ask them to meet us at Ryan and Langley. We work in silence. No official channels, no uniforms. Sir, what is the mission profile? Logan put the ring that belonged to his father in his pocket. Intelligence collection and protection. We learn what these towns are actually constructing. But protecting Oak Hollow comes first. Engagement rules. Only defensive. We're not going to go to war. Logan looked through his weapon locker and picked out items that might be transported covertly. However, they are going to discover why Navy SEALs are the industry standard for close-quarters warfare if they wish to introduce military methods to my neighborhood. Logan's screens displayed further information regarding Steel Legion's operations as he got ready to leave. Real estate purchases, shell corporations, and enigmatic shipments. Whatever they were constructing was highly developed and well-funded. He told Torres one more thing. Gather as much information as you can about Chuck Loganson's military history for me. Not the public file, but the true one. What specifically led to his release is what I want to know. For the last time, his phone vibrated. From Oak Hollow, another message. Professional equipment and surveillance are being set up. They're not simply motorcyclists. No, Logan said as he looked at Chuck's picture. They're not. However, they committed a grave error. He reached for his go bag, which was prepared for any eventuality. In the wrong town, they threatened the wrong family. Logan knew this wouldn't be a straightforward altercation between a SEAL and some motorcyclists as he made his way to the shuttle that was waiting. There was more to this. Organized crime, disguising itself as lawful security measures. But at the moment, one basic reality was more important than all of that. His mother had been threatened. And Logan Walker has been honing his threat-handling skills for 15 years. Maggie Walker was sitting at her kitchen table looking at ancient maps of Oak Hollow that were laid out in front of her when night fell. They identified every key spot the Steel Legion might target. Grain storage, the railroad depot, and important crossroads. Her fingers traced pathways and alternate roads around the town she had known her entire life in the gentle lamplight. Sheriff Morrison softly stepped through the back door. Checkpoints have been positioned on the former Mill Road and County Road 7. Radio communications, night vision, and professional equipment. Maggie asked, not looking up from her maps, how many men? Now at least 30. Every few hours, more arrive. A chair was dragged up by Marshall. They are no longer even feigning to be bikers. These new ones move in a military manner. As the C-130 transported him and his small team home, Logan Walker, 30,000 feet above Kansas, studied comparable maps on his laptop. Opposite him, Lieutenant Torres was going over the latest intelligence. According to Torres, the actual paperwork for Chuck Logan's son just arrived. He was more than just a ranger. He conducted off-book specialist missions and was released following a botched operation in South America. Something concerning shipments of weaponry going missing. Logan came to the conclusion that he was now establishing his own enterprise, utilizing motorcycle gang intimidation as a front for a larger scheme. A seasoned SEAL with gray threads in his temples, Chief Parker leaned forward. Unusual shipping patterns around Steel Legion territory have been reported by local police in 3 states. Heavy security, big trucks moving at night, and no official documentation. Helen Roberts brought her medical bag to Maggie's residence back in Oak Hollow. Henry has his arms set, but I'm concerned about other people. Stress is affecting some of the elderly people. Additionally, the Steel Legion has been threatening people one-on-one. Maggie finally looked up and said, they're trying to break us apart. Before they actually move, South Division. Lieutenant Rodriguez retrieved surveillance images from the C-130. They have strong business ties. Defense contractors and private security companies. Anything that they are transporting through these locations is valuable enough to require expert protection. Logan went on to say that they utilize the gang image as a cover since it is risky enough to require deniability. Helen Henderson's voice shook in Oak Hollow as she gave the most recent update. The Johnsons are discussing agreeing to their conditions. People are afraid after what happened to Henry. And now there's talk of our supplies and shipments being halted. Marshall said that was their pattern. Divide, conquer, and isolate. It's too late by the time people realize what's actually going on. An encrypted transmission from Logan's intelligence connections rang on his satellite phone. Through shell corporations, storage facilities, and transportation hubs that are all related to important distribution routes, Steel Legion has been acquiring properties. Examine their communication styles, sir. Torres indicated a document. Not only are they cooperating amongst towns, they have a large boss to report to. For Oak Hollow's resistance, Maggie's home had evolved into a temporary headquarters. Henry Peterson showed in with a slung arm and a determined expression. You must see what I found. He laid out pictures on the table. Surveillance footage showed Steel Legion members gathering at private airfields with suit-clad guys. Marshall understood they weren't simply after Oak Hollow. We are a component of a larger network. Logan got another intelligence update in the air. I received confirmation of their corporate support. They are occupying more than simply arbitrary towns. On American soil, they are constructing infrastructure for private military operations. Chief Parker stated that criminal intimidation was being used as a cover. Astute. Who looks into the trafficking of military-grade weaponry by a biker gang? Maggie heard engines approaching back in Oak Hollow. She observed Steel Legion troops erecting fresh monitoring posts outside her window. They moved with coordination and precision. Not like regular motorcycle riders. They're getting ready for something, Marshall said. They're either anticipating trouble or something with this degree of security. Or safeguarding something of value, Maggie concluded. Something that will happen shortly. Logan's crew mapped out their insertion plan on the C-130. He clarified, we land at the private airfield outside Minneapolis. Vehicles will be waiting for the local contact. Before acting, we enter in silence, set up surveillance, and obtain intelligence. Timeline? Torres inquired. 6 hours remain until dawn. Their attempt to seize the town will be made at that point. As midnight drew near, Logan sent Maggie another message in Oak Hollow. Maintain your position. We'll be there. Before we get there, don't allow them split up the town. However, she could hear more motorcyclists coming in as she read the message. The Steel Legion was amassing troops more quickly than anticipated. She watched from her window as Chuck Logan's son set up a cordon around Oak Hollow, commanding his men with military accuracy. They know, Marshall said. They know aid is on the way, somehow. They're speeding up their time frame because of this. Maggie recognized the tactical pattern Logan had previously described to her as she examined the military placement around her town. They were not limited to Oak Hollow. They were getting ready for siege. She informed Marshall that dawn would arrive early and that we must prepare. Logan Walker looked at his watch over the heartland of America. It would take them 6 hours to get to Oak Hollow, and 5 hours to score a touchdown. All he could hope for was enough time. Because the Steel Legion was getting ready to prove that they were more than simply a motorcycle gang, somewhere in the darkness ahead. Oak Hollow found itself at the center of something far more dangerous than just small-town intimidation as they prepared to expose their true intent. The main street in Oak Hollow was bustling 3 hours before morning. Members of the Steel Legion established checkpoints at each significant intersection while moving with military accuracy. Black SUVs with tinted windows, which spoke of professional security operations rather than gang activity, now accompanied their motorcycles. From her dimly lit living room, Maggie observed 2 guys dressed in tactical gear setting up security cameras on the power poles. Unlike the bikers who had initially arrived at the market, their moves were efficient and well-practiced. Marshall Morrison said quietly, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Take a look at that gear. It's military-grade equipment. They were both apprehensive when they heard a knock at the rear door, but it was just Henry Peterson, who was wearing a sling over his broken arm. You have to see something. He laid out a number of pictures on Maggie's kitchen table. I took these near the old grain depot an hour ago. Members of the Steel Legion were seen in the photos unloading big packages from trucks that were not marked. However, Maggie's attention was drawn to the men overseeing the operation. Instead of leather vests, they wore suits and ties. Logan Walker's crew, meanwhile, was collecting their own intelligence while on the ground outside of Minneapolis. Torres, looking at his laptop screen in their inconspicuous van, said that satellite shows increasing activity across their entire network. Whatever Oak Hollow is planned, it's a component of a larger scheme. Chief Parker said, much bigger, and hung up. We recently received word from our federal law enforcement contact. Private military shipments from bases in 3 states have been linked to Steel Legion. They put together a pattern map which Logan examined. They're not merely occupying cities. They are constructing a shadow infrastructure by transferring military-grade equipment under the guise of small-town companies. Chuck Logan's son returned to Oak Hollow and inspected his men's positions on Main Street as if he already owned it. Still in the aftermath of yesterday's altercation, he made a stop at Maggie's market stand. He knew she could hear him from her home, so he yelled out. By now, most people would have fled and packed up. I suppose you inherited part of that tenacity from your military son. Maggie's hand gripped her coffee cup tighter within. They were aware of Logan. How much did they know, the question was. Got movement, Marshall said, gesturing toward the train station. There were more unmarked vehicles coming in, along with SUVs and motorcycles. Logan's intelligence connections gave him an urgent update on the outskirts of Minneapolis. We have confirmation, sir. There is more to Steel Legion than just moving weapons. Whole military systems that shouldn't be on American territory are being transported. Torres noted that small towns were used as cover. In farming villages, who pays much attention to grain shipments and storage depots? Logan's mouth clenched. They therefore require complete authority over these towns. Everything might be revealed by one person asking the wrong questions. Carrying her iPad, Helen Henderson sneaked into Maggie's home in Oak Hollow through the back door. This is something you must see. Security footage from her son's hardware business was displayed. Members of Steel Legion were seen in the video talking about their plans without realizing that the store's cameras could record sound. One man said, "We start a full lockdown once the shipment is in place. Like Millbrook, no one enters or exits without permission." Schedules accelerated, someone else said. The facility must be functioning before. As though feeling he had said too much, the man abruptly stopped and looked around. Now 30 minutes outside Oak Hollow, Logan's crew was approaching in radio quiet. According to Torres, who was reviewing drone footage, Steel Legion's commanding officer had just arrived in town. Private security operations in war areas are the specialty of an ex-military contractor. Chief Parker recognized they weren't planning a gang takeover. Using civilian infrastructure as a cover, they are creating a safe area of military caliber. Something about the Steel Legion's deployment pattern caught Maggie's attention in Oak Hollow. By positioning their men in this manner, they were safeguarding particular routes through the town rather than merely controlling entrance points. All the roads that lead to. She pulled out her municipal maps and said abruptly, the railway depot. That's where everything links. They're protecting the back roads, the trucking routes, and the grain storage. Not only are they occupying the town, but they're also. Marshall completed the construction of a distribution center. Concealed in plain view. Who questions the movement of grain shipments and farm equipment across rural America? Logan's mother had left him an urgent message on his satellite phone. A large object is being moved into the train depot. Farm equipment camouflaged as military trucks. Whatever they had planned, it is already taking place. Torres yelled out from the front of their car, "Sir. The depot is very active, according to thermal imaging. Numerous cars and armed guards. Serious security is being built up." Chuck Logan's son was speaking to his soldiers in Oak Hollow, his voice piercing the pre-dawn darkness. Lockdown procedures are in place. Nobody comes in or goes out without permission. Extreme prejudice is applied to any resistance. Maggie observed additional tactical troops moving through her community. There is obvious military training in their moves. It wasn't motorcyclists pretending to be troops. These were professionals who were hiding something much more dangerous behind the reputation of a gang. "Dawn's coming," Marshall muttered. "When it does, too." When it did, Maggie was done. We'll discover what precisely they have concealed at that depot. And why, in order to defend it, they were prepared to occupy a whole town. As they got closer to the edge of Oak Hollow, Logan took one last look at his weapons. "We enter silently," he informed his group. "Observe and collect information. However, if they're passing through civilian communities with military equipment." Chief Parker came to the conclusion that this was no longer a local issue. This pertains to national security. As both sides braced themselves for the impending event, the eastern sky was just starting to brighten. In less than an hour, Oak Hollow would either be the first town to be taken over by a group that had perfected the art of disguising military operations beneath criminal intimidation, or it would be the front line in exposing a large weapons trafficking operation. A mother and son were ready to remind the Steel Legion why some threats against family should never be uttered, somewhere in the shadows. As Logan's team set up their first observation post on the edges of Oak Hollow, the sky was tinted gray by dawn. They watched with increasing alarm as Steel Legion operated through powerful optics. "That isn't typical gang security," Chief Parker muttered. "They have professional communication systems, counter-surveillance methods, and overlapping fire zones. They're not really bikers," Torres continued, keeping an eye on radio frequencies. "Pay attention to the way they communicate. That's the stuff of private military contractors." Chuck Loganson oversaw the arrival of further unmarked trucks at the railway terminal. Tactical gear that matched his military demeanor had taken the place of his leather vest. The individuals who had threatened the farmers' market were not these same men. This was the real face of the Steel Legion. Logan checked his encrypted phone and reported, "Mom is in position. They're moving something large into the main storage area of the depot," she says. "Significant hardware and several security teams." Maggie Walker was inside Oak Hollow, quietly talking on the phone with her son while she watched the operation from her kitchen window. Overnight, the Steel Legion changed from being a biker group to something much more violent and professional. She muttered into her phone, "They have the entire depot locked down. But there's a problem. Particularly in the vicinity of those storage containers they brought in, some of their own workers appear uneasy." Logan said quietly, "That's because they don't all know what they're really guarding. We have confirmation, Ma. Military-grade weaponry systems are being moved. Items that have no business being on American land." Marshall Morrison, who had been trained as a sheriff, joined Maggie at her window, taking in the details. "The individuals in tactical gear are newer and are preparing for a long-term operation. Controlling the town is no longer the only goal." Logan also caught a glimpse of the Steel Legion security routine through his scope. They're not merely keeping an eye on the boundaries. They are keeping an eye on their own citizens to ensure that no one approaches those containers too closely. Torres whispered softly, "Sir," and there was movement at the east entrance of the depot. "An inspection team of some sort is coming." Men in pricey suits rode in the unmarked SUVs. Something else, not corporate types. They moved with the same vigilance Logan had seen in intelligence gathering. He told his crew to check their approach pattern. Several cars, synchronized motion, these aren't entrepreneurs. Carrying her iPad, Helen Henderson made her way to Maggie's residence in Oak Hollow by sneaking through back lanes. She reported more footage from the cameras in the hardware store. They were discussing buyer inspection and demonstration samples. "Someone is coming to look at whatever they have at the depot." "Buyers of weapons," Marshall said sadly. "This stuff isn't just being moved about town. Oak Hollow is being used as a showroom." Concern grew as Logan's staff kept an eye on the depot. In an attempt to pass for civilians, the recently arrived inspection team behaved like foreign military officers. "Sir," Torres said, looking over intelligence reports. Two of them were only flagged by facial recognition. Well-known arms dealers with ties to markets that are off-limits. Chief Parker stated in a low voice, "They're actually doing it. Small-town America is being used to conceal global arms sales. Who would ever glance here?" Chuck Loganson conducted his guests inside the depot with a level of professionalism that looked inappropriate for a head of a biker gang. Maggie and Marshall watched the exchange on the security camera of the hardware store. Chuck was stating that our distribution network is totally safe. Law enforcement in the area is under control. Routes for transportation are set up. Anywhere east of the Mississippi, we may transport goods without raising any red flags. What about the residents? With a slightly foreign accent, one of the guests inquired. Won't be an issue. Like Millbrook, we're putting full control mechanisms into place. The satellite phone Logan was using vibrated. His mother sent him another message. There's something going on. Their security forces are beginning to disperse around the town. Torres acknowledged that they are starting a lockdown while keeping an eye on their communications. Beginning to regulate all traffic entering and leaving Oak Hollow. From her window, Maggie observed as Steel Legion members started knocking on doors, their professional demeanor clearly indicating their intentions. This was no longer gang intimidation. This was population control in the military sense. Is it time to relocate? In a low voice, Chief Parker questioned Logan. Not quite yet. First, we must be clear about what we are working with. Logan used his scope to examine the depot. Can you approach those storage containers, Mom? We must verify what they are displaying to those purchasers. Maggie said she was already on it. She had studied every aspect of Oak Hollow for decades. Even the Steel Legion's monitoring was unable to cover several of the town's routes. However, Chuck Loganson's voice reverberated through the early air as she was about to move. Residents of Oak Hollow, take note. This area is now secure. Anyone seen outside their homes without the required permission will be taken into custody. This is the only caution you have. As more tactical teams moved through the town, Logan observed through his scope. All pretense of being just another motorcycle gang had been abandoned by the Steel Legion. They were now revealing who they really were. Criminal intimidation is being used by a private military force to conceal something much more deadly. Torres phoned urgently, "Sir. Something is being detected in the containers via thermal imaging. Something that fits the description of." He stopped, reviewing his readings again. "They're more than just moving weapons, sir, if these signatures are accurate. Whole armament systems are being moved. Items that, if they reach the wrong customers, could cause regional instability." Maggie had decided in Oak Hollow. "Marshall," she whispered softly. "Prepare everyone. They must first demonstrate their ability to govern each and every one of us if they hope to take over this community." At last, the morning sun rose beyond the horizon, revealing a changed town. Due to the discovery of a global weapons organization, Oak Hollow had turned into a battleground. Its citizens would first need to prove to the Steel Legion that tiny towns were more resilient than they appeared. As he saw everything through his scope, Logan Walker realized that there was not much more time for subtle observation. He would soon have to explain to these private military contractors why Navy SEALs were regarded as the best fighting force in the world. A transformed Oak Hollow was lighted by the morning sun. As they carried out their control procedures, Steel Legion security squads went from house to house. However, they were discovering an unforeseen issue. Homes were empty, people were absent, and the community appeared to have subtly vanished overnight. Chuck Loganson, looking over his team's reports, recognized something was amiss. The population is far smaller than expected. They're where? Maggie Walker grinned a little inside the old grain mill, which was now a temporary headquarters for the opposition in the town. For years, Oak Hollow had been constructing underground connections between buildings, secret passageways, and hidden storage areas. These strangers were unable to comprehend the intricacies of what appeared to be a straightforward farming village. How many? Marshal Morrison looked over his list and inquired. Nearly 200, Maggie said. Safe in the storm basements and the old Prohibition tunnels. They are powerless over persons they cannot locate. Through their scopes, Logan's squad observed the Steel Legion's mounting annoyance. According to Torres, patrols are being doubled, beginning the search for a property. However, they lack the inhabitants' knowledge of the town's layout. The foreign customers in the train depot were becoming anxious. With a stressed-out tone, one stated to Chuck, "You assured us this area was secure." Chuck assured that it was safe, but his face was worried. Just a few locals having fun. They'll get it. However, Oak Hollow wasn't having any fun. Overnight, the town started putting plans into action. Everywhere, tiny acts of resistance started to appear. Roads experienced unexpected, unexplained mechanical issues. Strategic locations saw fluctuations of power. Unexpected interference occurred in communications. According to one of Chuck's lieutenants, they are using the town itself against us. Every time we attempt to regulate a system, something goes wrong. As if everything is rigged. Through his scope, Logan whispered, "Because it is. Every tactic Dad taught us about passive resistance is being used by Mom. 1,000 cuts to death." The tactical teams of the Steel Legion were faced with countless little issues. Automobiles experienced flat tires. The equipment broke down. Each time they managed to secure a region, issues would arise elsewhere. Chief Parker noted that they are adjusting. Converting to patrols on foot. Enlarging the area surrounding the depot. I'm becoming serious. Maggie used an ancient CB radio network to coordinate with her neighbors within the grain mill. The modern equipment of the Steel Legion was not keeping an eye on something. Cause the drainage issue close to their south checkpoint, Helen. It's time for the gas leak you had the hardware store prepare, Henry. The satellite phone Logan was using vibrated. One of his intelligence connections sent him a message. Customers attested. 3 distinct organizations are represented by known arms dealers. At midday, high-value demos are planned. Torres recognized that as their weakness. For these buyers, they must continue to project a secure image. They appear weak every time they are disturbed. The same had been true for Chuck Loganson. His next radio call revealed mounting annoyance. "I want to lock down this town immediately. Anyone discovered outside their residences is immediately placed in custody. Apply as much power as is required." However, this reaction was already anticipated by Oak Hollow's opposition. Teams from Steel Legion discovered that the town's layout was against them when they attempted to carry out the new directives. Alleys that are narrow. Basements that are connected. Old storm drains. While the foreigners found it difficult to keep control, the natives were able to walk around freely. Torres called softly, "Sir. The tunnel system beneath the depot is moving, according to thermal imaging. Those storage containers are being approached by someone." Logan used his scope to observe his mother's skillful slipping between buildings, which came from knowing every inch of her town for decades. She was using the commotion as cover as she made her way toward the depot. He muttered, "Be careful, Mom," but she couldn't hear him. Their actual training is beginning to show. He was correct. The Steel Legion was responding in a more militaristic and professional manner. Teams maneuvered with tactical accuracy. Defining areas of responsibility that overlap. The biker gang persona has vanished entirely. Chief Parker pointed out that these are more than just security contractors. Examine their reaction routines and movement patterns. They are veterans of special operations. As if they had previously done this. The international buyers, inside the depot, watched the situation with increasing anxiety. If one little town is out of your grasp, another one will start. Chuck interrupted him, though. Believe me, he stated in a firm voice. This demonstration will go according to schedule by noon. He had underestimated the town's tenacity and its hidden strengths, and anyone who believes they can meddle will discover why the Steel Legion's reputation isn't merely for show. Chuck took a decision that would alter everything as his crews reported yet another round of interruptions. He said, "Bring me whoever is organizing this resistance. How you find them is irrelevant to me. And set an example when you do. Prove to this town the consequences of interfering with legitimate military operations." Logan's group observed the tactical units of the Steel Legion start conducting more vigorous searches. "They're getting worse," Torres said. "They are beginning to resemble actual fighting teams." "Good," Logan said as he silently examined his firearm. "Because they will soon discover the capabilities of actual battle squads." Over Oak Hollow, the rising sun rose higher. Both sides were getting ready for what was about to happen. A major fault in converting a tiny town into a military-grade weapons arsenal was about to be discovered by the Steel Legion. The residents had nothing left to lose and could only pass right past them. At 10 in the morning, the Steel Legion made their first significant error. Their tactical teams were aggressive in their property searches as a result of the frequent disruptions. They encountered Reverend Samuel and 24 elderly choir members who just would not budge as they attempted to break into the old church. "You can't just walk in here," said the Reverend coolly. "This is God's home." Logan saw the altercation intensify through his scope. Professional training was provided to the Steel Legion team. However, they had never faced opponents who used biblical verses and hymns to fight. "Sir," Torres said, keeping an eye on their exchanges. "They are preparing to set an example and are requesting backup." "Perfect timing," Logan said. "Is our diversion prepared, Chief?" Carefully placed explosive charges exploded at an abandoned warehouse on the opposite side of town. The reaction from the Steel Legion was prompt and expected. To look into the threat, several teams veered off course. "The channels are clear." Logan's encrypted radio carried Maggie's voice. Using the old tunnel system, she had used the confusion to sneak closer to the depot. "But you must see this, Logan. The weaponry they have in stock. It's larger than we anticipated." Chuck Logan's son was growing impatient inside the depot. His business was collapsing in front of the foreign buyers. His leadership was methodically weakened by his professional image collapsing as a little town. He instructed his troops to locate the person in charge of organizing this resistance. "I don't care how now. But farming for generations had taught Oak Hollow how to fight. The skill of patience. Of continuously taking tiny steps to weaken more powerful opponents. Each time the Steel Legion solved one issue, 3 more arose in other places." Torres called softly, "Sir. The contents of those storage containers are visible by thermal imaging. It goes beyond weapons. Whole missile guiding systems are being moved. Targeting equipment of military quality." Chief Parker coldly added, "The kind that may transform unrefined rockets into precision weapons. It makes sense that they required this degree of protection." The dispute peaked inside the church. Embarrassed by their failure to move a gathering of elderly singers, the Steel Legion squad eventually used force. However, Logan's squad carried out their plan as soon as they touched Reverend Samuel. The fringes of the town were rocked by several minor explosions. Additional diversions. More mayhem. In an effort to counter threats from all sides, the Steel Legion soldiers further divided. The 4-man crew moved with the kind of skill that only years of special operations training could impart, and nobody saw them sneak through their perimeter in the commotion. Logan radioed softly, "Mom. We're in our place. How near are those containers to you?" "Near enough," Maggie said. She had found the storage section by using her familiarity with the ancient maintenance tunnels in the facility. However, we have still another issue. They're getting ready for a demonstration of some sort. I've never seen moving equipment like this before. They saw Chuck giving more desperate commands through the depot's security cameras, which had been compromised by Oak Hollow's tech-savvy youths. As their ostensibly secure facility descended into anarchy, the international buyers were growing agitated. This is not acceptable. One customer spoke in a furious accent. Chuck asserted, if you can't control one small town, the situation is under control. But there was hesitation in his voice. He consulted his tactical group. Go around the town. Anyone discovered outside their residences is placed in detention. Extreme prejudice is applied to everyone who resists. However, his teams encountered a community that had become one enormous trap as they made their way to comply. Tractors that had broken down clogged the streets. Inexplicably, water mains broke. Power transformers malfunctioned during crucial times. Chief Parker noted that they're not merely resisting. They are wearing them down and giving their buyers the impression that they are incompetent. Maggie discovered something inside the tunnel system that completely altered the situation. Her voice came urgently over the radio, Logan. These are not merely models for demonstrations. An automatic security system of some sort has been installed across the depot. Military-grade equipment. Logan understood that this was more than simply a temporary storage location. By utilizing Oak Hollow as a front for continuous weapons shipments, they are transforming the hamlet into a permanent distribution center. At last, things at the church became heated. The Steel Legion crew pulled weapons because they were so irritated. However, an odd thing occurred before they could take action. Their radios stopped working. Their cars refused to start. All of the contemporary equipment they were carrying just ceased functioning. Torres indicated that the EMP device was keeping an eye on the effects. Regional. Not harmful, but efficient. Thanks to the teens who have been damaging their equipment. Through what remained of their communication equipment, Chuck Loganson's voice cracked. Complete lockdown for all teams. Those discovered outside their homes should be detained. In an hour, the demonstration will begin. However, his teams encountered a people that had spent centuries preparing for hardship as they attempted to carry out the orders. Being weak has not allowed Oak Hollow to withstand natural disasters, drought, and depression. Torres reported immediately, "Sir. Heavy machinery of some sort is being moved into the display space. The thermal signatures are in agreement. These weapon systems are prototypes, sir. Items that belong only in military research labs." As more vehicles without markings pulled into the depot, Logan stared through his scope. In an attempt to save their enterprise, the Steel Legion was speeding up its chronology. But they were making mistakes because they were desperate. He radioed, "Stay hidden, Mom. We move when they begin their demonstration. We then demonstrate to them why certain little communities pose a greater threat than any armed force." As both sides readied themselves for the impending event, the morning sun reached its zenith. The Steel Legion had their professional tactical teams, their weaponry, and their training. But Oak Hollow possessed something more powerful. Under the leadership of a mother and son who saw that real strength was about understanding precisely when and how to deploy weapons, the community came together to defend their home. Steel Legion's issues began 15 minutes before the scheduled high noon start time for the weapons exhibition. The first was a total failure of their secure communications technology. Then there was static on their backup channels. At last, their security cameras started playing back and forth of the same deserted hallways. As Chuck Loganson's sophisticated security system collapsed, he knew that someone was into our networks. Look for them. However, the kids from Oak Hollow, under the leadership of the grandson of Helen Henderson, had been causing digital mayhem all night. As soon as the Steel Legion's technical team resolved one issue, 3 more arose. In order to appear inept to their consumers, they are attempting to postpone the protest that Logan watched from his concealed location close to the depot. Maggie Walker had arrived at a maintenance shaft just below the display area using the old tunnel system. Her blood froze at what she saw through the grating. She muttered into her radio, "Logan. They're not merely flaunting their guns. I've never seen prototype systems like these before. And the town is the target of all of them." The international purchasers were growing impatient. One of us complained to Chuck that we were guaranteed a secure facility. "Rather, we come with amateurs who are unable to even operate their own equipment." Chuck's professional manner broke when he pushed that the demonstration go ahead. He consulted his tactical group. "Go through the system as a whole. Track down the person generating these interruptions. Apply as much power as is required." However, his teams encountered a new issue as they made the necessary adjustments. Orders were beginning to be questioned by their own people. While seeing the brutal detention of citizens, one Steel Legion member mumbled, "This isn't what we signed up for. Professional security, not thugs, is what we're meant to be." Logan's group kept an eye on the escalating conflict. "Sir," Torres said. "A few of their more recent hires are stepping aside. The weapons were unknown to them. Believed that this was only a territorial expansion." Chuck attempted to salvage the situation within the main storage area of the depot. He spoke to the buyers, "Ladies and gentlemen. The precision warfare of the future is embodied in what you are about to witness. Weapons that are ready for use right away and may be deployed anywhere by disguising themselves as regular cargo." A series of explosions from the fringes of the town cut short his talk. More of Oak Hollow's well-thought-out diversions meant to wear down Steel Legion's troops. Chuck told his teams to ignore it while they asked for authorization to answer. "Pay attention to the demonstration. Show our visitors why investing in these technologies is worthwhile." However, another issue arose when technicians turned on the prototype guns. Sensitive electronic systems in the depot received feedback when the power grid abruptly varied. A security team reported that someone was entering the main breaker room. However, that isn't feasible. It is heavily guarded. They were unaware that the electrical grid in Oak Hollow had undergone changes decades prior. The town's electrician, Old Man Peterson, had developed auxiliary controls and bypass systems that weren't included in any formal drawings. Maggie radioed Logan that she needed 10 more minutes. She was approaching the guns through the pandemonium, recording everything with a tiny camera. "These aren't just cutting-edge weapons, though, son. Something terrible is out there." As more members of the Steel Legion started to doubt their commands, Logan observed through his scope. The reality of their operation was emerging as the facade of professional security began to fall apart. Torres phoned urgently, "Sir. The town is being used as a test range for a targeting system, according to thermal imaging." Maggie could hear Chuck attempting to save his presentation through the maintenance tunnel. Even with these small technical problems, the weapon's capabilities are still unheard of. Total targeting independence and undetected deployment. One of his own lieutenants interrupted, "And totally illegal." The man dropped his tactical equipment at Chuck's feet after taking it off. "You told us we were protecting this, but it's not. Instead of dealing in weapons, we should be professionals." As more Steel Legion members started to step down, the overseas buyers watched in increasing alarm. What had appeared to be a demonstration of advanced weaponry was degenerating into a highly visible breakdown. Chuck said, "Last chance," with a hint of threat in his voice. "Anyone who is not dedicated to this endeavor must depart immediately. Additionally, realize that leaving entails understanding things you aren't authorized to know." It was too late, but the threat was obvious. Every unlawful weapon and every menacing word has been captured on tape by Logan's crew. He radioed softly, "Mom. Do whatever you're doing down there as quickly as possible. It's going to get ugly." He was correct. As his procedure came to an end, Chuck made a last, desperate choice. Start the weapons test, he said. Complete demonstration. Show them the full capabilities of these systems. A technician objected, sir. The targeting systems are not calibrated correctly. Now it could be done with them. Chuck had a full-blown break in his professional mask. Everyone should see what happens if they tamper with our business. However, their targeting system abruptly locked onto fresh coordinates as the prototype guns came to life. They focused on their own power sources rather than the town. What's going on? Chuck insisted. A technician frantically reported that the targeting protocols had been compromised. We have no control over where the systems are focused, but they are activating. Logan smiled a little to himself. The grandson of Helen Henderson had just demonstrated why it was a grave error to underestimate computer nerds in small towns. It was going to be a very different kind of event, this demonstration. It would explain to the Steel Legion why certain little communities posed a greater threat than any military force. Particularly when his tenacious mother and a Navy SEAL were collaborating to keep them safe. Using an electronic whine that permeated the depot, the prototype weapons targeting systems locked onto their own power grid. As the demonstration got out of hand, warning lights flashed across control panels. Chuck watched his elaborate operation come to a halt and gave the order to shut it down. The targeting systems should be overridden. A technician frantically reported, We can't access our own control procedures because someone locked us out. Though internally targeted, the systems are fully armed. Maggie recorded it all from the maintenance shaft. The panic of the foreign buyers. The requirements for illicit weapons. Chuck's orders became more and more urgent. Proof that would reveal the entire scheme. She radioed softly, Logan. Do whatever you have planned right now. They are going to take a severe step. She was correct. Chuck Logan's son made a deadly choice while observing years of meticulous preparation fall apart. He commanded his remaining loyal men to carry out the contingency protocol. No evidence, no witnesses. His lieutenant objected, Sir. The people out there are civilians. They pose a risk to the security of the country. Chuck interrupted him. Tainted by data they weren't permitted to possess. Put the protocol into action. However, more soldiers of the Steel Legion were defying orders. The true nature of their enterprise was exposed, and the professional security facade had entirely collapsed. Unwilling to take part in what was about to happen, some were already turning themselves into the local authorities. Using thermal imaging, Torres reported that they are fracturing. Of their army, around half are standing down. The others are preparing for full-scale combat. Logan looked at his weapons. Let's introduce ourselves. Is the perimeter safe, Chief? Parker confirmed that every exit was covered. The state police are stationed immediately outside the town. There are no federal response teams for 20 minutes. The overseas buyers discovered they had fallen into a trap when they entered the depot. Their commander declared, "This is unacceptable," and started to leave. Our administrations won't. Chuck informed them icily that your governments aren't supposed to know you're here. You've seen too much now. Everybody has. Targeting protocols hooked upon their own infrastructure, the weapon systems persisted in their electronic shriek. The feedback was beginning to overburden the depot's electrical system. A technician said, "This whole place is going to melt down. It was never intended for the prototypes to." Chuck said, "Then we start scorched earth. Clean everything. No witnesses, no proof, no." A strange sound stopped his order. There were several explosions near the facility. Logan's group had started working, methodically destroying Steel Legion's escape routes. Logan radioed Maggie to let her know that we were moving in. His mother, however, had other ideas. She observed Chuck's remaining faithful soldiers getting ready for their last instructions from her concealed location. These were no longer only security contractors. Professionals in a tight spot, they were prepared to destroy any danger to their business. According to her, the electricity grid has dead man switches. They will overload the entire system if they are unable to control the weaponry. Eliminate half of the town. Logan saw the situation worsen through his scope. While others were fleeing or surrendering, Chuck's loyalists were assuming tactical positions. When the international buyers discovered too late the true nature of the operation they had been dealing with, they were stuck. Chuck gave the order for all squads to execute containment. He spoke with the icy accuracy of someone who had done this before. Nobody departs with useful information. Get rid of everything. A new development interrupted his order. All the lights in the depot went out. A few seconds later, the emergency power went out. Then there was a startling silence as the electronic shriek of the weapons silenced. What just took place? Chuck insisted. A technician stated that someone had cut the main power. Not only here. Sector by sector, they are destroying the entire grid. The electrical bypasses installed by Old Man Peterson were operating flawlessly. The technological advantages of Steel Legion were being methodically stripped away by the town, leaving only their most basic capabilities. Chuck discovered too late that they had planned this. The entire town. They're not only bucking. They are tearing us apart one by one. Logan's group approached, hiding in the shadows. They observed, using night vision, how the rest of Steel Legion gathered around their commander, awaiting orders that might lead to mass killings. Logan radioed on an open frequency as a last resort. Give up now. Get your cooperation fully considered. Proceed with this operation. Accept the consequences. Chuck responded right away. He shouted into his radio, "You have no authority here. This security operation has been authorized." No, Maggie's voice could be heard. Under the guise of military credentials, this is a criminal organization. We also have evidence. She sent a few of her images to the few working screens in the depot to illustrate her point. Pictures of illicit weaponry, unapproved systems, everything required to fully reveal the operation. After gazing over the proof that his operation had failed, Chuck came to a choice. He commanded his surviving loyal men to kill them all. Set everything on fire. No witnesses, no proof, no. In the dark everything echoed. Logan's crew fired with precision, taking down weapons but leaving civilians unharmed. A blatant display of their powers. One last warning, Logan said. The subsequent shoots won't be as cautious. As both sides braced themselves for what was about to happen, the depot fell silent. Chuck's devoted corps of military specialists and the remaining members of Steel Legion faced off against a tiny town and a Navy SEAL unit who had completely outwitted them. The stalemate was about to take a very different turn. It was not only a military conflict, it was also a lesson in underestimating those who stood to lose everything. In the shadows, Maggie Walker was getting ready to demonstrate to these seasoned troops why their worst error had been to attack her community. As Steel Legion's core force engaged Logan's position, muzzle flashes shattered the darkness of the depot. These were not your typical gangsters. Their well-coordinated and accurate fire demonstrated years of expert military training. Chief Parker confirmed that the ex-Special Forces were firing back with meticulous accuracy. Rangers, perhaps, Delta. These folks are extremely knowledgeable. Years of SEAL training guided Logan's every move as he made his way through the shadows. He used his night vision to observe the tactically effective deployment of Chuck's surviving loyal warriors. 20 or so men, all moving like seasoned pros. "What's up with Mom?" He spoke softly into his radio. "It's clear in the main control room," Maggie said gently. She had reached key locations by using her familiarity with the depot's repair tunnels. However, they have a dead man switch of some sort, Logan. Logan concluded by saying, they will destroy everything if they can't have the weapons, including half the town with their power grid overload. Chuck's voice, now uncannily quiet, rang out through the night. Are you aware of the value of these weapons? How much might some nations be willing to spend on precision attack capabilities that cannot be tracked? Now go down, perhaps we can work something out. A volley of bullets retorted. Chuck's crew was forced to cover by accurate bullets from Torres' position. These were no armed street thugs. This was an official military operation. According to Torres, the outside perimeter has been confined by state police. They are holding any members of the Steel Legion who are attempting to flee. But after observing their movement patterns, Logan recognized that these core guys weren't attempting to flee. In an attempt to restrain us and obtain something more important than weaponry, they are causing us pain. Maggie realized what they were truly defending in the maintenance tunnels. She radioed the paperwork, including financial records, contact lists, shipping manifests, and anything else that may reveal their entire network. In fact, Chuck's group was moving deliberately, hiding their commander as he entered a secret safe room. These men had previously collaborated, most likely in war zones across the globe. According to Parker, the Federal Reaction Team is 15 minutes away. However, thermal imagery indicates that they are getting ready for an explosive failsafe, sir. If they are unable to remove their evidence. As Steel Legion's experts demonstrated their full potential, a fresh round of gunfire ripped through the depot. They were methodically obstructing access to vital areas rather than merely firing to kill. Chuck yelled, "You don't know what you're interfering with. It's not just about the weaponry here. We're making the globe safer by giving friends who require deniable assets capabilities." With his voice clearly audible, Logan said, "By converting American towns into arsenals. Is it possible to conceal military-grade weapons using civilian infrastructure? More firing, more accurate motions in the dark." The training and experience levels of the two teams were equal. However, Logan's team had a significant edge. They fought for the protection of people, not for financial gain. Maggie arrived to a crucial intersection in the tunnel system. She could see Chuck's team getting ready for their final defense from here. She saw demolition charges of military quality positioned at key locations. She radioed frantically, "Logan. They have more in mind than simply destroying evidence. No one will be able to prove anything because those charges will destroy support columns, collapse half of the depot, and bury their operations so deeply." Logan came to a close. He decided after consulting his magazine. Every team should follow the Sierra pattern. Prepare yourself, Mom. Even among special forces, Navy SEALs were regarded as elite, as what transpired subsequently showed. Using the design of the depot to counter the Steel Legion's defensive positions, Logan's team advanced with coordinated precision. Although Chuck's soldiers were competent, they had never encountered adversaries with such a thorough understanding of the battlefield. Each time they attempted to set up a crossfire, they discovered that outdated maintenance access points that weren't listed on any official drawings had jeopardized their positions. One Steel Legion operator urgently reported, "They're in the walls, using routes we were unaware of." Maggie's voice came over their radios because you never bothered to learn about the community you attempted to take over. A huge error. The international buyers fled for a secondary exit after realizing their position was crumbling. However, farmers with hunting rifles, people who had dedicated their lives to developing patience and accurate aim, blocked their escape route. "Chuck, it's over." Logan yelled. "You have contained your buyers. Your business is in the open. Get out of here before it gets worse." Chuck responded by initiating the initial demolition charge. Although the explosion shook the depot, it had the opposite effect of what he had anticipated. More concealed entry points were exposed rather than support structures collapsing. Maggie said on the radio, "You really ought to have studied local history. During the Prohibition era, this depot was constructed. The columns of support you're attempting to blow up. This building isn't truly supported by them. Logan's group advanced by methodically eliminating Steel Legion's last strong spots while taking advantage of the chaos. They were more than just skilled operators. They were experts who learned to fully trust one another, trained together, and fought together. As his squad arrived to the last defensive position, Logan declared, "Last chance. Give up now, or discover why SEALs are the industry leaders in close combat." Chuck gave another explosive response, but this time it showed how desperate he really was. He was no longer attempting to destroy evidence. In an attempt to conceal his team's escape with as much collateral damage as possible, he was causing pandemonium. However, he had overlooked an important fact regarding small communities. Communities like Oak Hollow were able to endure by working together and understanding the advantages and disadvantages of their neighbors. Chuck seemed to provide Logan's side fresh advantages with each explosion he set off. One Steel Legion operator discovered too late that they were fighting more than just us. They are engaged in combat with the entire town. This was going to be a whole different kind of professional military engagement. A lesson in undervaluing groups of people who had learned to cooperate against larger, more powerful adversaries over years. There was an unplanned explosion to start the last confrontation. Chuck's final demolition attempt, which was intended to bring down the east wing of the depot, instead created a secret passageway just behind his position. Maggie Walker had been aware of this verse for many years. "What was your biggest error, do you know?" The radio system carried her voice. "Assuming that merely by examining the blueprints, you could comprehend this town." Logan's squad advanced by taking advantage of the chaos. They moved with the kind of synergy that only comes from years of operating together in the most hazardous environments on Earth, through the smoke and darkness. Torres reported calmly on the contact front. 6 adversaries, professional equipment. They're good guys. As Steel Legion's surviving operators attempted to adjust to a terrain that was constantly shifting beneath them, Logan retorted, "But not good enough." Each time they took a defensive stance, a local resident would open another old bypass or access point. There was a fresh tone of desperation in Chuck's voice. "What you're tampering with is unknown to you. The individuals we answer to, the agreements we have made." Maggie interrupted, "Oh, we know exactly who you answer to." She had arrived at the old record room at the depot, where the actual documentation of Steel Legion was kept. Discovered your actual shipping manifests, supplier and buyer lists, government contracts, and a lengthy paper trail. As Chuck's team attempted to prevent her from getting to their evidence, the sound of fresh gunfire reverberated throughout the depot. However, they were trapped between the town's defenses and Logan's advancing army. Chuck's operator yelled out, "Sir! There is motion in the walls. Some sort of tunnel network is being used by them." Logan clarified that the purpose of this depot was not limited to grain storage. Steel Legion's escape routes are being methodically shut off by his troops. It was a part of an underground railroad that transported supplies across the entire town during the Prohibition era. In response, Chuck gave his surviving soldiers orders to charge their arsenal of weapons. "No one else can have the prototype systems if we are unable to. And they take half of this town with them." Even this desperate action, however, demonstrated his lack of understanding of Oak Hollow's actual character. His troops discovered that the explosives had already been stealthily transported through abandoned grain chutes and maintenance tunnels as they hurried to install them. "Are you trying to find these?" There was a note of satisfaction in Maggie's voice. Everything Steel Legion had been attempting to sell, including the illicit weapons and prototype targeting systems, was now safely stored in secret locations across the area. Chuck growled, "It's impossible. Those systems are very heavy. They couldn't be moved without large machinery. When farmers get together, you'd be surprised at what they can do." His squad was now close enough to discern Chuck's position through the smoke, Logan remarked. "For example, after hunting for their family's food for generations, you would be astounded at how proficient they are at shooting. As though to demonstrate his point, Steel Legion's remaining operatives were pushed into ever tighter positions by accurate rifle fire from the higher floors of the depot. These were local hunters who knew every angle of the structures in their town, not military marksmen. According to Torres, the federal reaction team is 10 minutes away. All exits have been secured by state police. It's finished. Chuck Logan's son, however, had built his organization for too long to give up easy. Do you think this is the end of it? There was real malice in his laugh. We have comparable infrastructure in towns throughout 3 states, as well as networks of customers, suppliers, and political protection. Had, Maggie said. It wasn't simply shipment manifests she had discovered. Everything is shown in these records. Every town you've attempted to turn into a weapons depot, every corrupt official, every illicit transaction. Everything is here. The final split of Steel Legion was brought on by the revelation. Chuck's surviving operators dropped their firearms, hesitant to risk their lives to defend an already vulnerable operation. One of them yelled, "Stand down. Chuck, it's finished. Instead of being global armaments dealers, we were meant to be professional security." Chuck and his most devoted core group, however, weren't done yet. A fail-safe device that could still obliterate witnesses and evidence was their final hope. Chuck said, "This is your last warning. I'll cause a cascade overload in the town's electrical grid if you don't leave now. Your valuable concealed storage rooms and anything else within half a mile go up." Moving through smoke and debris with a lack of practice, Logan's crew was nearing the finish line. Now they could see Chuck with his remaining devoted operators. They all had a more professional soldier's appearance than the motorcyclists they had feigned. "You're not thinking like that," Logan said coolly. "That excess is brought on by you. You lose everything. The proof, the weapons, and any possibility of reaching a lenient agreement. Do you think I'm interested in deals?" Chuck sounded like someone who had nothing left to lose. "My legacy was meant to be this. Applying the abilities we learned in the military to provide weapons where they are most needed. Changing the world in some way. By converting American cities into arsenals." Maggie's voice broke through his defense. "Using our neighborhoods as a front to sell firearms to anyone who can afford them." With the exception of the distant sound of sirens coming and the crackle of tiny fires, the depot became quiet. Teams of federal responders were approaching. Chuck's business was collapsing in every manner. However, the most dangerous opponents were pros who were cornered. As they prepared for a final stand that would bring as many people with them as possible, Chuck's surviving devoted operators took up their last positions. Then Logan called out one last time. "Give up now, or discover why Navy SEALs are regarded as the best combat force in the world." Instead of losing control, Chuck reached for the fail-safe trigger, prepared to destroy everything. He was going to learn one last lesson, though, about the importance of protecting small communities and the people who live there. Chuck clenched his finger on the fail-safe trigger, preparing to blow everything up. However, the anticipated explosion never materialized. Rather, a faint clicking noise reverberated throughout the smoke-filled depot. "Are you trying to find this?" Somewhere in the darkness, Maggie's voice could be heard plainly. She displayed a crucial part of the fail-safe mechanism that she had taken out when navigating the maintenance tunnels hours earlier. "You ought to have taken more time to study the electrical layout of the depot." Chuck Logan's son was shaken by the revelation. The desperation underneath was shown as the professional mask came off completely. He lifted his firearm, disregarding convention and accuracy. He commanded his remaining devoted operators to take them out. Take them all out. However, Steel Legion's last assault promptly exposed a deadly weakness in their strategy. They had received training for professional combat situations and military activities. Fighting a whole community that had converted its infrastructure into a weapon was beyond their capabilities. Logan's group moved with well-honed coordination, employing positions and angles that were only known to locals. Unexpected sight lines and concealed access points undermined Steel Legion's cover each time they attempted to set up a firing line. As his team methodically destroyed Chuck's last forces, Logan yelled, "You still don't understand what you're really fighting. This goes beyond tactical advantage and military training." They could see the people of Oak Hollow moving with purpose and coordination through the broken windows of the depot. Every escape route was guarded by farmers armed with hunting rifles. Teens redirected Steel Legion's movements into pre-made traps by using their understanding of historic structures. Maggie continued, her voice resonating clearly over the radio system she had assisted in rewiring, "It's about community. Something you overlooked when constructing your empire of weaponry." In response, Chuck gave the order for his remaining devoted operators to flee to their secret command center. Call in backup from other facilities if they were able to access their secure communications. However, as soon as they broke through the door of the command center, that plan was shattered. The equipment had previously been disassembled and taken through paths not listed on any official blueprints, and the chamber was vacant. Torres reported calmly that federal response teams would arrive in 7 minutes. The entire perimeter is under state police control, so nobody enters or exits without permission. Chuck's remaining troops realized the pointlessness of their position and started to surrender. Expert combatants were aware when a battle was lost, but Chuck wasn't done yet. He had one last card to play, one last secret. "Do you think this is the end of it?" Now there was real wildness in his laugh. "We have comparable operations in cities all around the nation, as well as networks of customers, suppliers, and political contacts. You cannot stop everything." "Well, we can," Maggie said. She displayed Steel Legion's whole operational database on a hard disk. "Your whole network, every dishonest official, every illicit weapons transaction, all of it is being recorded, backed up, and sent to federal authorities at this exact moment." As federal response teams approached, the sirens became more audible. Chuck, however, had built his operation for too long to give up easily. He lifted his weapon one last time, aiming toward the main support column of the depot rather than Logan's crew. He hissed, "One final chance. I'll destroy this place if I don't let myself walk. And believe me, those walls still contain enough bombs to." A single accurate shot from Marshall Morrison, the sheriff of Oak Hollow, fired through a broken window, ending his threat, not from Logan's crew. Chuck's life was spared, but his weapon was taken by the bullet. An example of the sort of accuracy that resulted after years of meticulous hunting. Entering via an old loading door, Marshall remarked, "That's the thing about small towns. In order to keep food on the table, we have to learn to shoot straight ahead." The only sound in the depot was that of government cars arriving. With their operation fully exposed, Chuck's surviving operators dropped their weapons. Chuck, however, took one last desperate action. Pulling out a backup weapon, which was smaller but still deadly, he charged in the direction of the evidence storage area. Erasing just enough of the trail would allow him to destroy only the important documents. Logan's answer was a masterful example of battle in close quarters. The resolve of a son to defend his hometown, coupled with years of SEAL training. The battle was short, accurate, and utterly decisive. "Are you aware of your actual error?" As he fastened Chuck's shackles, Logan inquired. Forgetting that some things are more powerful than tactical advantage and believing that military training was sufficient. Like a mother's dedication to protecting her home, Maggie continued, bringing the last bits of evidence out of the shadows. Or the authority of a community to determine what takes on in their town. The majority of the work had already been completed when federal officials flooded the facility to seize weapons and evidence. The entire operation was meticulously revealed, the documentation was arranged and archived, and the prototype systems were securely concealed across the town. Professional soldier-turned-arms dealer Chuck Loganson surveyed the wreckage of his business. The type of individuals he believed would be simple to manage had methodically destroyed everything he had created, including every network, connection, and confidential agreement. As he was carried away by federal officials, he whispered, "You have no idea what you've done. The abilities of the folks I work for. I think you're the one who didn't understand what you were dealing with, Logan said gently. He observed his neighborhood, where teenagers, teachers, and farmers were all cooperating to defend their home. There are some things that are more valuable than money, power, or guns. At last the morning sun filtered through the shattered windows of the depot, revealing a town transformed in the course of the night. Professional soldiers, foreign arms merchants, and dishonest authorities had all been defeated at Oak Hollow. And they had prevailed by the kind of strength that only comes from unity, not by superior weaponry or tactical superiority. As federal authorities flooded the depot, dawn painted Oak Hollow in gold hues. While senior officials tried to understand the extent of what they had discovered, evidence teams cataloged documents and weaponry. While looking over Steel Legion's operating files, the FBI's lead agent informed Logan, "This is much larger than we anticipated." Using small communities as cover, they were constructing a whole shadow infrastructure in addition to transporting weapons. From her veranda, Maggie observed the arrival of further government trucks. While tactical teams secured the prototype weapon systems strewn over the town, state police process detained Steel Legion members. Examining the confiscated prototypes, a federal weapons specialist mumbled, "Some of these designs. They are classed in addition to being advanced. Things outside of military research facilities shouldn't be there." Logan's crew cooperated with federal investigators inside Maggie's kitchen. To indicate known Steel Legion facilities in neighboring locations, Torres laid maps out on the table. According to him, they have such operations in at least 6 states, utilizing local gangs as a front, manipulating officials, and converting rural areas into gun depots. "And that's precisely what we are aware of," Chief Parker said somberly. Chuck's documents point to ties to defense firms, private military contractors, and possibly foreign governments. Marshal Morrison, who appeared worn out yet resolute, joined them. 3 further Steel Legion members were discovered by state police attempting to access their backup communication site. "I had a really fascinating talk with them." "Are they conversing?" Logan inquired as he looked over surveillance images of other possible locations. "They're afraid," Marshall said. "Not of the prosecution, or of the actual employer of Chuck. It appears that our bike gang was only the outward manifestation of something far larger." Outside, Oak Hollow was gradually getting back to normal, but there were changes all around. Federal teams found secret weapons stores with the assistance of farmers. Teens described how they had broken into Steel Legion's communication networks, and the entire community came together to eliminate the threat. Helen Henderson showed up with some unsettling news and some fresh coffee. "My cousin in Millbrook just called. Their Steel Legion chapter is rapidly disbanding, destroying records, and leaving buildings unoccupied." As Maggie poured coffee for weary FBI officers, she explained, "Because they know we have their operational files. Every illicit transaction, every covert facility, and every dishonest official are all documented." However, the extent of the exposure was raising fresh issues. Logan observed further federal cars pull up, these transporting representatives of agencies whose names were never spoken out loud. Torres called, "Sir," from his laptop after noticing odd data patterns. "The backup servers for Steel Legion are being attempted to be accessed. Extremely complex cyber attacks. For this isn't finished," Logan said softly. There was one thing Chuck was correct about. Those in higher positions than him cannot afford to have their relationships made public. Recognizing the expression from his past deployments, Maggie examined her son's face. "How awful." Logan clarified that Steel Legion was merely the delivery system. "They have actual authority. They are responsible for securing political protection, supplying the classified weapons, and arranging the deals. Additionally, they won't simply abandon an operation of this magnitude." With a scowl, Marshall looked at his phone and saw news from neighboring counties about private security teams arriving close to small villages, professional operators, military equipment, and this time, no motorcycles. Chief Parker came to the conclusion that they were done acting. The person in charge of Steel Legion is moving to direct action. Cannot afford to expose their entire network. Federal teams discovered something more in the depot. Contingency plans and procedures for what would happen if their operation was compromised were concealed in Chuck's personal files. They are doing more than simply clearing the evidence. According to Torres, the documents were scanned. They are getting ready to destroy everything that would link them to these weapons shipments, including entire cities if needed. Maggie saw several unmarked cars pull up, carrying men who moved with a precision that suggested they were seriously trained in the military, not government spies, or something. "Logan," she replied softly. "Look at how those men are moving and keeping an eye on everything while they check in with the federal teams. They are not here to assist with the investigation." This just turned into something more than smuggling firearms, so her son gave a sad nod. Steel Legion wasn't the only thing we exposed. Whoever was actually in charge of them was exposed by us. We haven't even seen the resources those individuals have yet. Through teamwork and strategic planning, Ocalo had defeated the Steel Legion in its maiden combat. However, as more experienced operators showed up, Logan saw that they had truly sparked something far more significant. "Mom," he muttered. "I believe it's time for the entire town to come together because what's about to happen will make Steel Legion look like amateurs." The town had undergone a permanent transformation as the morning sun rose higher over Ocalo. They had dealt with criminal motorcyclists posing as military personnel. Professional soldiers posing as legal authority would now be their problem. And in the background, influential people were getting ready to defend their interests at all costs. When Ocalo's phone lines fell down at lunchtime, it was the first indication that something serious was amiss. After a few minutes, internet was available, and then mobile coverage stopped, thereby cutting off the town from the outside world. "Excellent work," Torres said, examining his apparatus. "They do more than simply block signals. Military-grade communication suppression is what they're utilizing. We observed the same things in war zones." More unmarked cars started to show up on the county roads coming into town, and Logan watched through powerful optics. The obvious muscle of Steel Legion was not these. Only years of intense military training could have given these operators the kind of accuracy with which they moved. Chief Parker noted that tactical gear was advanced by four-man teams. Contractors are not what these are. They are veterans of special operations, most likely from private military firms. Marshal Morrison laid out a map of new vehicle movements in Maggie's kitchen, which was now their command center. "Checkpoints are being set up here, here, and here. Procedure for professional containment. No one enters or exits without their consent." Logan, looking at the deployment pattern, indicated that they aren't come to take over the town. Their goal is to clear the evidence and get rid of everything that can reveal the true identity of Steel Legion's operator. Maggie observed additional tactical teams come through her window. She was reminded of Logan's unit training by their actions. The same meticulous synchronization, the same lack of control. However, these individuals were no longer serving their nation. They worked for anyone who could afford their services. Helen Henderson, who arrived with new intelligence from her local sources, revealed that the federal teams are withdrawing out. Received directives to disengage from higher authority. Let these new security contractors handle everything. Because there is a significant influencer involved. Torres continued, keeping an eye on radio frequencies. These contractors are utilizing equipment that is only available to government organizations. High-level help is being given by someone. An encrypted transmission from Logan's military contacts buzzed on his satellite phone. Hearing about comparable circumstances in other Steel Legion-operated villages. Federal authorities are being ordered to step aside when professional teams go in. Chief Parker understood they weren't just cleaning up one exposure. To cut off any ties to the person who actually carried out this operation, they are shutting down their entire network. Maggie recognized something from Logan's earlier lectures of military operations when she examined the deployment pattern of the tactical squad. They're not merely keeping us in check. They are transferring something precious in preparation for extraction. Marshall grimly added, or someone. Chuck Logan's son will be moving. These contractors, along with everyone else who knows too much, are here to ensure that he gets to their secure location. In order to coordinate with locals, Logan's crew traveled across the town. Through meticulous planning and community engagement, Oak Hollow had conquered Steel Legion. They had to get ready for something much more dangerous now. They're not thugs pretending to be soldiers. The town's Spontaneous Defense Council was briefed by Logan. These operators have extensive combat experience and are professionals. They have advanced political cover, military-grade weapons, and tactical training. They're not attempting to scare us, Torres continued. Their purpose is to resolve issues, tie up loose ends, and ensure that nothing relates to their actual supervisors. Residents of Oak Hollow observed additional tactical squads deploying throughout their community throughout the day. Steel Legion's biker persona didn't faze these lads. They established overlapping spheres of control, moving like the skilled troops they were. Parker, who was keeping an eye on thermal imaging, reported seeing movement at the depot. They're taking something larger than guns out of Steel Legion's safe storage facilities. Maggie took note of information that others would overlook as she examined the surveillance feeds. Examine their tools and the cases they are transporting. Those aren't canisters for weapons. They serve as data storage. They want the records of Steel Legion. Logan clarified that the firearms were merely a merchandise. The actual precious cargo consisted of names, dates, links to influential people, and documentation of their complete network. One more message buzzed on Marshall's phone before cell service went dead. State police officers are being told to keep their distance. A national security procedure was just triggered. Convenient, said Torres. While private military contractors remove the evidence, national security is being used to hide international arms agreements. Logan used his scope to observe the contractors as they expertly set up defensive positions. These men had most likely served with him in war zones all across the world. They were now protecting illegal organizations with that training. According to Parker, they have at least 50 operators. All former service members with combat experience. Plus whatever backup they are able to summon. Maggie said, observing additional teams deploy, and they're not just here for the weapons. For everyone who is aware of their operation, they are available. Anyone capable of revealing their true leaders. Using paths the contractors couldn't watch, the people of Oak Hollow congregated in the former church basement. Plans to guard against this new, more professional threat are being worked on by the entire town. Logan informed the gathered audience that they believe they are facing straightforward local opposition. They have no idea what makes tiny towns resilient. How people band together in times of danger. However, Steel Legion was not clearly intimidated by these contractors. They were dangerously sophisticated in their opening moves. Power began to go out in key areas of the city. In others, the water pressure decreased. Systematic isolation of critical infrastructure. Torres noted that the siege tactics were professional. They're not merely keeping us in check. By severing our resources, they are preventing us from successfully resisting. Additional tactical teams arrived throughout the afternoon, each displaying the kind of cohesion that comes from extensive battle experience. These were not soldiers dressed as mercenaries. These were highly skilled operatives carrying out their training. Logan cautioned, observing their deployment pattern, that they are getting ready for night operations. As night falls, they will take action to protect their targets and get rid of anything that might reveal their activity. After years of observing Logan's unit train, Maggie recognized something in the actions of the contractors. They are doing more than just organizing extraction. Take a look at how they have their teams positioned. They're getting ready to tidy up. Marshall came to the gloomy conclusion that they couldn't risk leaving witnesses. Anyone who is aware of their actual activities and has the ability to link them to Steel Legion. Long shadows were produced by the afternoon sun as Oak Hollow got ready for the impending event. Through meticulous planning and community action, they were able to destroy Steel Legion. They were now up against highly skilled warriors who posed a far greater threat. Logan whispered softly, "Mom," as he observed further tactical teams enter. These men aren't only carrying out orders, regardless of what occurs next. They are defending influential individuals who cannot afford publicity. Maggie understood the ramifications and nodded. Beyond illicit weaponry, Oak Hollow has discovered something more significant. They had uncovered a network that linked government corruption and corporate influence to criminal gangs. Both sides braced themselves for the impending darkness. The contractors had high-level assistance, equipment, and training. However, Oak Hollow possessed something more powerful, a community banded together to protect their house, guided by a mother and son who recognized that real strength stemmed from solidarity. With skilled operators guarding information that may upend the foundations of power, rather than thugs posing as troops, the real fight for Oak Hollow was about to start. Powerful individuals were also observing in the encroaching darkness, prepared to take whatever necessary action to safeguard their interests. Over Oak Hollow, darkness descended like a tactical advantage, but it wasn't immediately apparent which side would benefit. The town's citizens knew every shadow, every secret path, and every hidden way around their village, but the contractors had better visibility thanks to their night vision equipment. According to Torres, they're traveling while keeping an eye for thermal signs. Professionally spaced four-man squads begin their sweep pattern. Through sophisticated optics, Logan observed the contractors starting their work. They moved with the kind of accuracy that comes from years of expertise in special operations. These men were bringing their abilities to a little Minnesota town after perhaps serving in the most hazardous locations on Earth. Parker added that they were monitoring encrypted communications and receiving signals from their command channel. This is known as Operation Cleanup. Ordered to remove any traces of Steel Legion's actual activities. And, Marshal Morrison said coldly, anyone who knows too much. In order to ensure that nothing could be tracked, he had witnessed the contractors unloading not only weapons but also supplies for managing hazardous sites. The town's defenders huddled behind maps of contractor locations in Maggie's kitchen, which was now their main command center. These weren't the clear advantages of Steel Legion. These tactical placements were selected by professionals. Logan clarified that they have counter-surveillance technology, motion sensors, thermal imaging, and designating sniper locations along the main roads. These folks are extremely knowledgeable. Maggie responded, looking at the old town maps she had taken from the library's archives, but they don't know what we know. The historic civil defense shelters that no one ever mapped, the storage areas from the Prohibition era, and the drainage tunnels from the 1920s. They kept an eye on the contractors' progress via their secret radio network, which was powered by tools Logan's team had brought. In order to find Steel Legion's documents, professional operators went from house to house. Torres noted, they're not just after weapons. They are searching for particular documents or data that might reveal their true affiliation. Through carefully concealed wireless connections, Helen Henderson's grandson monitored their systems and intercepted bits of correspondence from the contractors. People who have witnessed too much and are aware of their actual operation are the main targets they are discussing. As he examined his own tactical equipment, Logan clarified that this was never simply about importing firearms. Steel Legion was a component of a larger network that linked political corruption, corporate power, and criminal gangs. The contractors' night actions outside demonstrated their full potential. Using strategies Logan was familiar with from his own special operations training, teams moved with precision and coordination. These were not soldiers dressed as mercenaries. These were top-tier operators performing their best work. According to Parker, they are beginning the process of deleting Steel Legion's secure files at the depot. After that, they will sanitize each sector as they move outward. However, Oak Hollow was ready for such a professional operation. Contractors encountered resistance from the town's infrastructure as they progressed. Strategic locations saw fluctuations of power. When they attempted to enter several buildings, the water pressure died. Random interference occurred in communications. Maggie coordinated the town's defensive measures and added, "They have the training. However, we have generations of information about this location and the connections between everything." When the contractors attempted to enter Steel Legion's primary storage location, they encountered their first significant issue. The doors were quite simple to open, however they opened into empty chambers. Every important piece of evidence had already been transported via routes not included in any official plans. A contractor commander requested a status report from their team. The main target files are where? The answer came in the form of negative contact. The storage spaces are vacant. No recent movement is seen. Because the people who lived in Oak Hollow had used the wisdom that had been passed down through the years to execute their task with care. Heavy boxes were hauled by farm equipment. Materials were redirected by old grain chutes. A whole town banding together to safeguard evidence that might reveal high-level malfeasance. Torres cautioned that they are beginning house-by-house sweeps and use more aggressive search patterns, keeping an eye on their thermal signatures. These guys aren't going to waste time making courteous requests. For full coverage, Logan's crew observed the contractor's deployment. Every movement they made was perfect, well coordinated, and left no aspect unexplored, demonstrating their training. It's likely that these soldiers had collaborated in war zones all across the world. Parker observed that there was an increase in vehicle mobility. They're bringing in some significant equipment, heavy transport vehicles. They observed expert operators unloading equipment that shouldn't be in the hands of anybody other than the military through the town's antiquated security cameras, which are now carefully concealed from contractor searches. Equipment made to handle delicate materials and get rid of issues entirely. Marshall concluded, looking at their deployment pattern, that this is no longer just cleanup. In order to prevent anything from leaving Oak Hollow that would reveal their activity, they are getting ready for complete confinement. Maggie used their covert communication system to coordinate with the people of the town. Contractor movements from hidden positions were reported by farmers. As the entire community banded together to oppose professional military operators, teenagers kept an eye on their electronic signatures. Logan informed his squad that they believe they are hunting civilians. They are unaware of the true challenges they face and the resilience of communities in the face of danger. The contractors' actual skills were exposed during their nocturnal activities. Teams worked with deadly efficiency, methodically looking for witnesses and evidence. These men had previously completed similar tasks for influential individuals. According to Torres, they were receiving signal transmission from their command channel. They are requesting heavier equipment, more operators, and their second phase. They're not wasting their time. Logan observed the contractors setting up new defense positions via his scope. These weren't the clear advantages of Steel Legion. These were carefully selected sites with crucial terrain control. The sort of strategic placement that resulted from extensive battle training. They're not just keeping us in check, Parker said. They're getting ready for something more significant, making sure that no one gets in the way of whatever comes next. After years of observing Logan's unit train, Maggie recognized something in the contractor's movement pattern. Take a look at their deployment. Finding evidence is no longer the only goal here. They are preparing for complete deniability. Marshall said bitterly, because they cannot risk being exposed. If the corruption in the government and the connections to power that we discovered in Steel Legion's files are made public. As both sides braced themselves for what lay ahead, the darkness grew deeper. The contractors had high-level assistance, equipment, and training. But there was something more powerful in Oak Hollow. Under the leadership of a mother and son who recognized that true strength came from standing together, the community banded together to defend their home. As more contractors arrived, Logan informed his team of what would happen next. Remind yourself of the true cause of our war. Not only to save evidence, but also to uphold local communities' autonomy over what takes place in their places. The contractors were going to discover why some tiny villages were more hazardous than any military force, but their nocturnal activities went on with expert precision. Particularly when such places had people to protect and nothing left to lose. When the contractors attempted to enter Oak Hollow's former library at midnight, the first actual altercation broke out. They anticipated a straightforward public facility with easy access. Instead, they were up against a well-thought-out defensive that negated their own tactical advantages. Watching through thermal imaging as another contractor squad retreated from well-planned resistance, Torres noted, "They're learning. I'm beginning to see that this goes beyond civilian opposition." Utilizing their expertise in special operations, Logan's squad has arranged themselves in key locations across the town to plan Oak Hollow's defense. These were not only sporadic acts of defiance. This was a synthesis of generations of local knowledge and professional military thinking. According to Parker, 3 more squads are advancing on the depot. Deconstruction equipment and heavy machinery. They are no longer only searching for proof. They're getting ready to get rid of everything. Maggie worked with the locals using their covert communication channel in the old tunnel system under the town. They had learned every weakness, every strength, and every potential technique to use the town itself as a weapon from years of maintaining its infrastructure. According to Helen's grandson, power grids are reacting precisely as expected. Temperature variations impact their thermal imaging, and random interference affects their electronic surveillance. Frustrated by their lack of progress, the contractor's commander authorized more aggressive methods. The entire breach protocol has been approved. He spoke over the channels they watched. Locate those files. Get rid of any opposition. However, Oak Hollow was ready for this turn of events. The layout of the town worked against contractor teams as they went to carry out their new orders. Map-perfect streets became strategically confusing labyrinths. Simple-looking buildings had secret defense locations inside. "They've got the training," Marshall said, observing as skilled operators fought off well-prepared villagers. "However, we have something more powerful that they are unable to comprehend." Logan observed more contractor units deploying with tactical accuracy via his scope. These men have likely served with him in the most hazardous locations on Earth. They were now discovering why some little communities posed a greater threat than any area of conflict. Torres reported urgently that they were getting movement at their command position. Professional direct action operators and their heavy reaction squad are being called in. Arriving in unmarked black trucks with equipment that shouldn't be outside of military supervision was the contractor's elite unit. They weren't merely security firms. When governments needed issues resolved once and for all, they called these operators. Logan cautioned his squad that this is their true potential. The operators that take care of cleanup when influential people want evidence removed. However, Oak Hollow had anticipated this degree of resistance. When the contractor's top team started their operation, they encountered opposition that matched their expert accuracy. Several compromised breach points were reported via their command channel. These are not merely citizens who are confronted with coordinated tactical response. Maggie, who coordinated the town's response, clarified, "Because we're not just defending buildings. We are defending something valuable, our neighborhood and our house." The contractors' actual capabilities were demonstrated during their night activities. Teams worked methodically to secure their goals while moving with deadly efficiency. However, the town's defenses changed, adjusted, and employed their own strategic thinking against them each time they believed they were in charge. Parker noticed that professional operators were beginning to make mistakes as they struggled against well-planned resistance, losing their synchronization and becoming agitated. They saw the contractor's commander realize what he was truly up against through the network of concealed cameras. Not merely opposition from civilians, but organized defense under a serious military leader. He gave his teams instructions to sweep every institution. identify the person organizing this resistance and remove their leadership. They were surprised at Oak Hollow's leadership system, however. They encountered dispersed opposition rather than consolidated authority. Every resident was aware of their place, duty, and contribution to communal defense. Torres yelled out that they were receiving information from their command post. They are demanding full containment protocol, more teams, backup, and heavier equipment. Additional contractor vehicles arrived, and Logan saw them through his tactical scope. These squads were more than just security. These were expert military units prepared for high-stakes battles. Parker cautioned, they're deploying for full assault. Coordinated breach points and many teams. They have finished being cautious. However, Oak Hollow was ready for this turn of events. Contractor crews discovered that the town's infrastructure was fully working against them when they attempted to carry out their assault strategy. In key areas, power failed. When they attempted to enter several buildings, the water pressure died. There was a total breakdown of communications. All of the contemporary technology they depended on stopped working. Maggie clarified that this town is more than just streets and buildings. Utilizing their covert network to coordinate the defense. It is the result of generations of preparation, expertise, and teamwork. Frustrated by their lack of progress, the contractor's top team made the decision to show off their actual ability. Unaware that they were entering well-prepared defensive positions, they got ready to breach the town hall. According to Torres, there are several teams coming together. Their primary goal is to seize the central control point in an attempt to disrupt our coordination. However, no building served as the focal point of Oak Hollow's defense. It was a part of the community. Among farmers who were familiar with every field and route. In young people who were aware of contemporary technology. Among inhabitants who had prepared for difficult times for generations. Logan informed his crew that they were going to discover something significant. Observing the contractors as they get ready to attack. Something regarding the survival of tiny villages. Why societies endure. The contractor launched his strike with expert accuracy. Several groups were breaking in from various directions, employing strategies that had most likely been successful in battlegrounds across the globe. However, they encountered opposition that was unlike anything they had prepared for. Every point of entry turned into a tactical nightmare. Coordination of defense met every advance. People who know their home better than any attacker could ever hope to do so thwarted every attempt to obtain an advantage. "We're under fire, Command," according to reports that came through their line. "These opposition professionals are not citizens." Marshall answered, "Because we're not just defending buildings." However, they were unable to hear him. Something more significant is being safeguarded. Something to fight for. Oak Hollow's defense throughout the night demonstrated why some localities were more resilient than any military force. The contractors had tactical experience, equipment, and training. However, they encountered an obstacle they were unable to surmount. A town banded together to defend their house. Sunrise marked the start of the last battle, as the contractors launched what they believed to be their final offensive. They had professional combat expertise, cutting-edge gear, and excellent training. However, they had made a critical error in judgment. They continued to believe they were battling civilians. Several teams are in motion. Torres said he was keeping an eye on their deployment. Complete tactical reaction. Their attempt at subtlety is over. Through his scope, Logan observed contractor teams moving with military accuracy. It is likely that these soldiers had been part of special operations teams all around the world. They were going to discover why some little communities posed a greater threat than any area of conflict. Parker stated that they were receiving signals from their command station. This operation is known as Clean Sweep. Orders to remove all resistance and evidence. However, Oak Hollow has been prepared for this event all night. Contractor teams discovered that the town's fortifications had advanced beyond their training as they proceeded to carry out their assault strategy. Helen's grandson reported from their secret command center that power grids were responding. Active electronic countermeasures. They are experiencing sporadic interference with their tactical equipment. Maggie organized the last defense of the town through the old tunnel system. They had learned how to leverage everything from water pressure to electrical distribution as tactical benefits from years of maintaining community infrastructure. "They're attempting to enter the main storage area of the depot," Marshall yelled. 3 teams in expert gear are searching for the paperwork for Steel Legion. However, there was no building where those files were. They were dispersed across the town, concealed in locations that only residents would be aware of. Locations not shown on tactical maps or official blueprints. Through their channels, contractor teams reported, "Command, we're running into organized resistance." They are not ordinary citizens. They're employing military-level strategies. In order to direct Oak Hollow's defense, Logan's crew had positioned themselves tactically and used their expertise in special operations. There was concerted opposition to each contractor advance. Their attempts to take advantage of every tactical edge backfired. As Maggie coordinated through their covert network, she stated, "Because we're not just defending buildings. We are defending our house, our neighborhood, and something worthwhile." When the commander of the contractor realized the magnitude of the situation, he took a last, desperate choice. He gave his teams the command to start Protocol Omega. Complete containment reaction, no evidence, no witnesses. However, such order exposed their real vulnerability. More of their own operators started to doubt their purpose as contractor teams shifted to execute their final protocol. One of the team leaders lowered his rifle and declared, "This isn't what we signed up for. Professional security is what we're meant to be, not killers." Through their command channel, Logan's voice could be heard clearly. Not crooks targeting American neighborhoods to shield dishonest public servants. They observed other contractor teams stepping down through their surveillance network. Prior to becoming private operators, these individuals had served their country with distinction. They were now being told to fight the very thing they had vowed to defend. According to Torres, they were receiving movement at their command station. Several cars are leaving. They are attempting to evacuate their leadership. Ocala, however, had anticipated this scenario. Every escape route was covered by residents who knew their community better than any tactical team could, not by military personnel. Logan declared on all the channels that this was your last warning. Now get down. Everything, including Steel Legion's operations, your business relationships, and the government authorities involved, is documented. The commander of the contractor tried one final time to save his mission. "What you're tampering with is unknown to you. The folks we expose are the ones we work for." Maggie interrupted. Every illicit arms transaction, dishonest public servant, and criminal scheme masquerading as private security. A town that had undergone permanent alteration was lighted by the morning sun. When contractor teams realized how helpless they were, they started to turn themselves into the local government. These professional troops had at last realized that they were up against a community that was united in defense of their home, not just civilian opposition. According to Parker, federal response teams are on their way. This time, real ones, with orders from unbuyable folks. They saw the contractor's operation fall apart through the town's security system. Weapons were secured, teams dispersed, and the truth about Steel Legion's true mission started to surface. "We discovered additional files," Marshall said as he brought a hard drive. Thorough records of their network, including every firearm transaction, shady relationship, and official they bought off. Logan's team made sure that all evidence was securely stored by coordinating with the federal officials who were arriving. Stopping a single operation wasn't the only goal, exposing a system that has manipulated private military force against American communities was also important. As Maggie saw contractor teams being screened by federal officials, she noticed that they believed they could rule little villages. Utilize our communities as a front for their illegal activities. Logan answered, because they never understood what makes places like Ocala strong. Not simply structures or infrastructure, but also individuals cooperating to safeguard what is important. As the town started to return to normal, the morning sun rose higher. Store owners reopened their establishments, farmers inspected their fields, and neighbors assisted one another in fixing damage caused by the fighting that night. Mother and son witnessed their community's demonstration of why certain locations were more resilient than any military force throughout it all. Because of the ties that held people together when they were threatened, not because of weapons or tactical advantages. As government teams proceeded to review evidence, Marshall joined them in whispering, "You know they'll try again somewhere else. Other communities, other towns. Let them try," Logan said with assurance. Because other communities will now understand that they may take action to defend their own. Oak Hollow had discovered illicit arms activities, taken on professional military contractors, and exposed high-level corruption. However, their triumph meant more than simply defeating a formidable foe. Maggie told the assembled townsfolk that demonstrating that local communities have the authority to decide what occurs in their villages is the true triumph. That certain things are more powerful than any military might. As Oak Hollow started to mend, the morning sun peaked. They had defeated criminal motorcycle riders posing as troops, followed by professional soldiers working for criminal organizations. They had demonstrated something significant about American communities throughout it all. That coercion or threats were ineffective in controlling some areas. That certain ties were more powerful than any tactical edge. And that sometimes the strength of a group of people banding together to defend their home was a more potent weapon than military training or sophisticated gear. Steel Legion was complete. Their operations were halted, their network was made public, and federal officials learned of their corrupt relationships. But the significance of Oak Hollow's victory was greater. A reminder that genuine strength came from family, community, and the decision to unite in the face of danger. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you like this one. Simply click to view, and remember to subscribe. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.